Whispering Willow Tree. Part 1. The Girl Who Listened. Long ago, in a quiet village nestled between the Silver Hills and the Sapphire Lake, there stood an ancient willow tree. It had been there for as long as anyone could remember, its long green tendrils brushing the ground like nature's curtains, always dancing to the soft wind's lullaby. The villagers called it the Whispering Willow, for it seemed to murmur secrets when the breeze passed through its branches. Most thought it was just the rustling of leaves, but not Elara. Elara was a girl of 11 winters, with curious eyes the color of stormy skies and a heart full of wonder. While other children ran in the meadows or fished by the lake, Elara would sit beneath the willow tree for hours, listening. And one dusky evening, just as the sun dipped behind the hills and the first fireflies began to glow, the tree whispered something different. It didn't sound like wind. It sounded like words. Elara, the whisper came, so soft she almost thought she imagined it. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. The voice was old, older than the hills, yet gentle, like the sound of snow falling in a dream. "You hear me," it said again. "You are the first in 100 years." Elara pressed her ear to the bark. "Who are you?" she whispered back. "I am the keeper of lost stories," the tree replied. "And you, child, are the listener I have waited for." Part 2. The Keeper of Lost Stories. Elara sat still as the willow's voice settled into her thoughts like morning mist. "Lost stories?" she asked. "Yes," the tree whispered. "Tales that were never told, dreams that were never spoken aloud, memories that time forgot. They came to me, and I held them in my roots, waiting for someone who could hear." Elara felt something stir beneath her. The earth itself hummed faintly, like a heart beating beneath the soil. "Why me?" she asked. "Because your heart is open, and your soul remembers the language of wonder. Few remember that now." Part 3. The First Memory. The next evening, Elara returned with a blanket and a notebook. "I'm ready," she told the tree. The willow rustled, its branches brushing her shoulders like a welcoming hug. "Close your eyes," the tree said. Elara obeyed. Suddenly, she saw a boy with golden hair standing in a vast, forgotten desert. He held a glowing feather and whispered to the wind. A mountain opened before him. He stepped in. When she opened her eyes, the tree spoke again. That was the first memory. His name was Kale. He once asked the wind to carry him to the sky. "I will tell you his full tale if you promise to listen." "I promise," Elara said, and her notebook lit up with the first words of Kale's story. Part 4. Kale and the Wind Feather. The wind feather was a gift, left behind by a skybird that vanished before the world had walls. Kale was no older than Elara when he found it. His village laughed at his dreams of flying, but the wind feather whispered secrets only he could hear. "Touch the clouds," it said. So he climbed the jagged cliffs beyond his home, each step guided by invisible winds. When he reached the top, the sky opened like a gate, and Kale stepped into a world that had no ground. Elara gasped. How did he not fall? Because he believed, the willow whispered. Part 5. The Sky Beyond the Clouds. In the sky world, Kale met the cloud weavers, beings made of light and thread, who spun dreams into stars. They had not seen a human in 1,000 years. They tested Kale's heart, weighing it against the weight of doubt. He passed, so they gave him a thread of pure starlight and told him, "You may stay or return, but only one path will remain." Kale chose to return. He had stories to tell, but when he came back to Earth, no one remembered him. Only the willow did. Part 6. Elara's Question. Elara clutched her notebook. So Kale was forgotten. Yes, said the tree, but not lost. His story lives in me, and now in you. The leaves trembled. A new voice whispered through the wind. Elara, come find me. Who was that? She asked. Another story, said the tree. Buried deep, a girl with no name who once vanished in the moonlight. Her voice has returned. Elara's spine tingled. Something ancient had awakened. Part 7. The Moonlit Path. That night, Elara dreamed of a moonlit path winding through a forest of silver trees. In her dream, she followed the sound of bells and saw a girl in a cloak made of stars. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes glowed with silent sorrow. She dropped a pebble that shimmered like a tiny moon. When Elara woke, the pebble was in her hand. The line between story and reality is thinning, the tree whispered. You are becoming part of the tale. Part 8. The Girl Who Vanished. She was called Myron, said the tree. Long ago, she wandered into the forest looking for her lost brother. She never returned. Elara sat by the roots, holding the pebble. What happened to her? The forest is a place of echoes, the willow said. Myron followed a trail of sound and became one herself. But why is she calling to me now? Because she sees your light. She thinks you might be the one to guide her home. Part 9. Into the Echo Forest. The next day, Elara packed a small bag with bread, her notebook, and the moon pebble. The tree parted its branches, revealing a narrow, hidden path, one no villager had seen in centuries. Walk until the wind stops, the willow said. Then wait, she will find you. Elara stepped into the shadowed forest. The air changed. It was thick with forgotten voices and soft lullabies that had no words. And then the wind stopped. Part 10. The Silent Hour. Everything was still. Elara stood beneath a broken archway of vines. She could hear her own heartbeat and nothing else, not even the rustle of leaves. Then she saw her. Myron stood on the other side of a dry stream bed, watching her. Neither moved. Slowly, Myron raised her hand and pointed behind Elara. Elara turned and saw shadows gathering in the trees. Not animals, not people, just shapes. The forest was alive, and not all of it wanted her there. Part 11. The Gathering Shadows. Elara froze. The air in the forest grew heavy, thick like fog, but without a mist to see. The shadows that emerged behind her had no clear form, just outlines like dark smoke, shifting and gliding, silent as falling ash. She turned to face them, clutching the moon pebble tight in one hand. "Myron," she called, her voice trembling. But the girl on the other side of the dry stream was no longer there. In her place, a soft bell chimed, once, twice. The willow's voice echoed faintly in her memory. The forest holds echoes, not all of them kind. The shadows surrounded her now. But instead of fear, a strange calm washed over Elara. She held up the moon pebble, and it began to glow softly, like the rising of a forgotten star. One by one, the shadows backed away. They didn't vanish, only paused. And then a whisper came, but not from the tree. It came from inside the stone itself. "Find the mirror in the roots of the sleeping mountain. Only there will the truth of Myron be shown." Part 12. The Mirror Beneath the Mountain. When Elara returned to the willow tree, her face was pale, and her hands shook slightly. She knelt beside the roots and placed the moon pebble on the ground. The tree's branches bent low, brushing her hair gently. "You've seen them," the willow murmured. "The shadows, they weren't evil," Elara said. "Just lost, like the stories you keep." "Exactly," said the willow. "They are fragments, pieces of memories without anchors. They swirl where no listener has remained." Elara told the tree about the voice in the stone, about the mirror beneath the sleeping mountain. "I must go there." The willow hesitated. Then it sighed, a sound like a breeze moving through time. "Then you must seek the hermit of Hollowfall. He lives between seasons, where time forgets to count. He knows the way to the sleeping mountain, but beware, he asks for stories in return." Part 13. The Hermit of Hollowfall. It took Elara 3 days and 2 dreams to find the hermit of Hollowfall. He lived in a cottage made of abandoned clocks and wind chimes, balanced at the edge of a cliff where winter and spring touched fingers but never embraced. The hermit was impossibly old. His beard shimmered like cobwebs in frost, and his eyes were different colors, one amber, one silver. "You've brought me no bread," he said, without looking up from his fire. "No," said Elara, "but I've brought you a story." At that, the hermit looked up. "A true one." "Yes, one the world forgot." She sat and told him of Kale, of the sky thread and the cloud weavers. She told him of Myron, of the echo forest, of the moon pebble that whispered. The hermit closed his eyes. "You have earned a path," he said, and from his coat of dream feathers, he drew a key shaped like a falling leaf. "The mountain sleeps beneath the lake of forgotten names. This will wake the roots." Elara took the key and bowed. Behind her, one of the clocks began ticking again, the first time in 100 years. Part 14. The Lake of Forgotten Names. The lake shimmered with silence. No birds flew here. No fish stirred beneath its surface. Even the wind held its breath. Elara stepped onto the shore, holding the key tightly. Her reflection stared back at her, but not just her. Behind her reflection stood Myron. Startled, Elara turned, but the girl was not there. Just the lake. She knelt and placed the key into the water. A ripple spread outward, slow and glowing. The lake responded with a low hum, like a song too old to remember. The center of the lake parted. A spiral of stone rose from its depths, steps leading downward into a hollowed hill. She walked down into the spiral, into a chamber where the walls pulsed like the inside of a living tree. At the center stood a mirror, grown not of glass, but of crystal and memory. It flickered when she approached. Her face disappeared and was replaced by Myron's. "Help me remember," the mirror whispered in the girl's voice, "so I can return." Part 15, The Forgotten Name. Elara placed both hands on the mirror. It was cold, but not lifeless. The crystal rippled like water, then hardened again. Inside it, she saw glimpses: a child running through tall grass, a brother laughing as he carved shapes into bark, a mother's lullaby lost in fog, a promise whispered to the moon, and then silence. Myron had wandered into the echo forest not to find her brother, but to find her own name. It had been taken, not stolen, but forgotten, the way old songs vanish if no one sings them. Elara whispered, "Your name is Myron. Your brother was Kale." The mirror shuddered. Light poured from the cracks in its frame, and far away in the forest, a shadow blinked and became a girl again. Part 16, The Girl Who Returned. That night, beneath the stars that seemed to listen from above, Elara stood once more beneath the willow tree. A breeze circled the clearing, not cold, not warm, simply alive. It carried with it the sound of footsteps, hesitant and bare, pressing into the grass like new memories. Myron stepped into the moonlight, no longer a flickering echo, no longer a shadow. Her hair shimmered with starlight. Her eyes, once hollow, now held reflection. "You remembered me," she whispered. Elara nodded. "Your story was never lost, just waiting." They sat together beneath the willow, and for the first time, the tree didn't whisper, it listened. Part 17, The Book That Grew Leaves. In the days that followed, Elara's notebook changed. Where there were once pages, now grew delicate veins, like the patterns on fallen leaves. Ink turned to glowing vines, and when she wrote, the words floated above the paper for a moment, before sinking into the pages like seeds into soil. Each tale she recorded, Kale's flight, Myron's return, the hermit's gift, grew into a living story. And then, one morning, a single green leaf sprouted from the spine of the notebook. The willow stirred. "You've begun to bloom," it said. Elara touched the leaf. It was warm. "You mean I'm becoming part of the tree?" "No," the tree whispered gently. "The stories are." Part 18, The Tale That Refused to Be Written. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in copper and rose, Elara sat beneath the willow with her enchanted notebook. She opened a fresh page, ready for the next story, but her pen refused to move. The page rippled, but no words would form. "I don't understand," Elara murmured. The tree was quiet for a long while, its leaves rustling thoughtfully. "Some stories do not want to be told," it finally said, "because they are unfinished or too painful." Elara frowned. "Can I help finish it?" A hush fell. Then the willow said, "This one begins in the village, long ago, before even I took root here. It is the story of a promise made beneath the full moon, and a betrayal that turned a child into a storm." A chill ran through Elara's spine. Part 19. The Child of the Storm. Her dreams that night were full of thunder. She saw a boy, no older than herself, standing on a cliff surrounded by lightning. His eyes burned like a fire that couldn't be put out. In one hand, he held a broken locket. In the other, a ring made of stone. All around him, the world trembled. "Elara," he said, but not to her. He said it like a prayer or a warning. She felt it strike the air. When she awoke, the wind outside howled, even though the skies were clear. The willow whispered, "He is coming." Elara held her notebook tight. "Who?" "The storm child," said the tree. "And he remembers a truth this village tried to bury." Part 20. The Village's Secret. Elara returned to the village the next day. The streets were quiet. The baker closed early. The well was dry. And when she asked the elders about the storm child, they turned away. "There was no such boy," one man muttered. "Just a tale." But Elara noticed the way his hand trembled, the way his eyes darted toward the hill beyond the lake. She followed the trail of silence. At the edge of the village stood a crumbled statue, worn by rain, its face broken, its name erased. Beneath it were the words, "He who was forgotten to save us all." And suddenly the wind whispered again, but this time not from the willow. It came from the hills, and it carried the sound of footsteps. Part 21. The Footsteps from the Wind. Elara followed the sound of footsteps echoing on the wind, faint, like the memory of a heartbeat. She climbed the hill behind the statue and reached a forgotten clearing where the grass grew in spirals and the trees bent unnaturally, as though leaning away from something they once feared. There a small cabin lay in ruins, stone walls cracked, roof caved in. Nature had claimed it, but not completely. In the center of the cabin stood a boy, barefoot, wrapped in wind. His cloak billowed, though there was no breeze. His hair floated as if underwater. "You finally came," he said. "Are you the storm child?" Elara asked. He looked at her with ancient eyes. "No, I was the storm's first victim." Part 22. The Boy with the Stone Ring. His name was Rowan. He was once a boy of the village, before the willow tree even took root. He was born during the rare red moon, when winds howled unnaturally and birds refused to fly. The elders called him cursed. His mother called him gifted. At 7, he began hearing voices in thunder. By 10, He could predict storms before they formed. But when lightning struck the village square during a clear sky, and 3 people were hurt, they blamed him. They didn't just exile him, they erased him. His home was burned, his name scrubbed from the records, and in his place, they raised the statue of silence. I became wind, Rowan said softly, because they took away everything that anchored me. Part 23. The Locket and the Lie. Elara noticed the locket still in Rowan's hand, cracked, but glowing faintly. It was my mother, he said. Inside was her last story, but they shattered it, said it was witchcraft. He opened it. Inside was a tiny fragment of paper, barely legible now, with a single word left unburned. Remember, they feared stories that couldn't be controlled, he whispered. So they buried mine. But the willow remembered. And now you do. Elara touched the notebook at her side. The pages shivered. Rowan's name, once erased, now bloomed like a flower across the page, in ink, in wind, in magic. Part 24. The Return of the Forgotten. Back in the village, strange things began to happen. Doors opened without being touched. Bells rang without wind. Children dreamed of a boy wrapped in clouds, whispering to them from the sky. Elara returned and stood beneath the old statue again. This time she opened her notebook and read aloud the name. Rowan of the Red Moon. The stone cracked. A gust of wind howled through the square. Not destructive, not angry, just present. Some villagers wept. Others bowed their heads in shame. Rowan stood beside Elara, invisible to them, but not to the sky. I don't want revenge, he said. I want to belong again. Part 25. The Willow's Second Root. The willow tree trembled as Elara and Rowan approached. You've returned, the tree whispered, and you are whole. Rowan placed his stone ring at the base of the tree. From that moment, something began to grow. A second trunk, thinner and newer, sprouting from the roots beside the original. This is yours now, the tree said. Your stories will not be forgotten again. Rowan touched the bark. His wind settled. His body grew clearer. I remember who I am, he said. And the tree answered, now others will too. Part 26. A forest that whispers back. Myron, Rowan, and Elara sat beneath the twin trunks. For the first time in centuries, the tree told its story. It had not always been a tree. It was once a spirit, a listener that wandered the world, gathering untold dreams and sheltering forgotten memories. It took root in this village because the silence here was too deep, too painful. I became still, it said, so they would come to me. And now, Elara asked, now you 3 have given me voice again. The forest around them stirred. All the forgotten stories began to flutter like leaves in the wind. And one by one, they began to speak. Part 27. The Village of Remembering. A year passed. The village changed. Walls were painted with murals of stories. Children were taught not just numbers and letters, but memory, wonder, dreams. The elders who had erased Rowan finally spoke his name aloud and planted flowers at the base of the crumbled statue. The Whispering Willow became a place of pilgrimage. Travelers came from far away to sit beneath its branches, hopping to hear a lost tale from their past. Some heard whispers, others dreamed, and Elara, she became the village's first keeper of stories. Part 28, Elara's Choice. One night, the willow whispered something new. Elara, your journey is not over. She looked up from her notebook. You have returned stories to the earth, the tree said. But many have been scattered across the sky. What do you mean? There are stars that hold forgotten dreams, cities that vanished from maps, names sung only once in history. You have a gift, child. You can find them. Elara stood. I thought I belonged here. You do, said the willow. But some stories only you can reach. She looked at Rowan and Myron. They both nodded. It was time. Part 29, The Starbound Path. Elara packed her enchanted notebook, a satchel of seeds from the willow, and the moon pebble that still shimmered faintly. The tree opened a path, not through the forest, but into the sky. A staircase of silver light unfurled above the branches, reaching beyond the clouds. Will I return? She asked. All stories return, the willow said, even those that take lifetimes. She turned, took one last look at her village, her friends, and the twin trees. Then, with a deep breath, she climbed, and the stars whispered her name. Part 30, The Librarian of the Sky. At the edge of the universe, where time curled like smoke, stood a library made of glass and wind. Each shelf held books that flickered in and out of view. Stories halfway born, dreams only spoken in sleep, poems that lived in single heartbeats. Elara entered, and the books turned toward her. She placed her notebook on the central table. It opened, glowed, then slowly began to lift. The room filled with thousands of voices, Rowan, Myrns, Kales, the hermits, and more. And in that moment, the stars remembered them all. Elara, the listener, had become the librarian of forgotten light. Part 31, The Book That Refused to Fade. In the library of forgotten light, time did not pass. It unfolded. Elara wandered through aisles of glowing scrolls and floating ink. Some books wept when touched. Others sang lullabies in languages the universe had stopped speaking. But among them all, one book sat apart, closed, heavy, and pulsing faintly. It was black as the space between stars, and etched with silver runes that changed whenever she looked too long. When she reached for it, her hand tingled. A voice spoke from behind her, quiet and unsure. Not that one, it said. That story wants to be erased. Elara turned. A girl stood there, made of stardust and sorrow. Her eyes held galaxies, but her body shimmered like a reflection that might disappear at any moment. I'm the ghost of a story never written, she whispered. But that book, it tried to write itself. Elara stepped back, What's inside? The girl lowered her voice to a breath. The memory of what the stars fear. Part 32. The star that forgot to shine. Elara left the forbidden book, for now, and followed the Stardust Girl through spiraling corridors of memory mirrors. The girl led her to a quiet balcony where a single star pulsed weakly in the distance. That star, she said, was once the brightest. Her name was Elara. She shone with so much love that ships used her to guide dreams across galaxies. Elara sat, listening. But one day, the girl continued, someone whispered a lie to her, that she was not special, that her light was borrowed, and she believed it. The girl nodded. She stopped shining, and when she did, thousands of stories were lost. Elara touched her notebook. It trembled. I want to go to her. You can try, said the girl, but you must enter the void between lights, a place where forgotten things feed on doubt. Part 33. The Void Between Lights. Elara stood at the threshold of the void between lights, a great chasm suspended in nothingness. No stars, no color, only silence so deep it made her ears ache. She took a step forward. Instantly, whispers flooded her mind. You are not real. You're just a dream. You will forget everything. They weren't voices from outside. They came from within her. The notebook in her satchel began to flicker, fading. No, Elara said aloud. I remember who I am. She pulled out the moon pebble and held it up. It glowed, dimly at first, then brighter with all the light of Myron, Rowan, Kale, and every story she had carried. The whispers recoiled. The void cracked open, just a little, and on the other side floated Elara, the fading star. Part 34. The Conversation in Starlight. Elara drifted toward Elara. The star's light was faint, pulsing like a heartbeat on the edge of silence. Why did you believe the lie? Elara asked gently. Elara's voice was soft, like wind moving through ashes. Because I burned so brightly. I feared I had no light left to give. Elara reached into her notebook and took out a thread of starlight. The same thread Kale had once received from the Cloudweavers. This belongs to you, she said. Elara blinked. The thread melted into her core. She flared once, then dimmed again. Not enough, she whispered. I need a story, a true one. Elara placed her hand on the star. Then let me tell you yours. And she began. Part 35. Elara's Memory. As Elara spoke, she saw into Elara's past. A time when the star was not just a point of light, but a guardian of a planetary realm that once thrived on dreams. She saw beings of liquid music who floated among crystal trees. She saw a great tower of reflection that rose from the planet's surface into the starry skies, and at its heart a promise. Elara had been given a sacred task to hold the light of that world after it fell to sleep. But time passed. The world forgot, and the star began to believe she was alone. Elara reached the end of the story. You weren't forgotten, she said. You were waiting for someone to remember. Elara trembled and then burst into full light. Not fire, not heat, but pure memory. The void cracked open behind them, and they flew back toward the library. Part 36. The Books That Breathed. When Elara returned, the library was different. Books that had been silent now fluttered open. Pages turned on their own, revealing scenes from forgotten civilizations. Underwater cities made of moonglass, mountain fortresses ruled by blind poets, islands that floated on whale song. Elara's notebook vibrated, and new vines began to wrap around its cover. She had become more than a librarian now. She was a story walker, someone who didn't just remember tales, but journeyed through them. But as she placed Elara's memory book on the glowing shelf, a familiar chill returned. The black book, it was open, and its pages were blank. Part 37. The Book Without a Story. Elara approached the black book. The runes around it spun, forming a single message. Write me. She sat before it, took her pen, hesitated. What do I write? She whispered. A wind blew through the library, carrying the echo of her own voice from long ago. Some stories do not want to be told because they are unfinished. Elara closed her eyes, and she began to write. Not a story of light or wonder, but of silence, loss, of a storyteller who once gave up their words to protect the world from forgetting itself. As she wrote, the book turned warm, and on the last page appeared a name. Elara. Part 38. The Memory of Elara. Suddenly, her notebook began to fade. She cried out, but the willow's voice reached her across space. You have given everything, even yourself. Elara stood in the center of the library. Her name was on 1,000 books, but her reflection began to vanish. She was becoming a story. The black book floated open, and stars began to emerge from its pages. Millions of tiny lights. They whispered in unison, You are not forgotten. Part 39. The Star That Held a Tree. Back on Earth, beneath the Whispering Willow, Myron and Rowan stood in the clearing. A new star had appeared in the sky, brighter than the rest. Rowan held the moon pebble. It pulsed. She did it, he said. The willow tree rustled. Its leaves shimmered with starlight, and in the roots of its twin trunks, a sprout appeared, not of wood, but of light. It hummed with Elara's voice. She had become the new root, the bridge between earth and sky. The First Story Tree. Part 40. The Garden of Remembering. Years passed, then decades. Children came from distant lands to sit beneath the glowing willow, to listen, to dream. Myron taught them how to hear whispers in the wind. Rowan showed them how to walk with wind in their hearts. And every night, when the stars rose, a single star pulsed brighter than the rest, the one that held 1,000 stories and one girl's name. Elara, the librarian, the listener, the story walker, the light that remembered what the world tried to forget. And still the willow whispered, because her story was not yet finished. Part 41. The Child Who Heard the Sky. One late summer night, many years after Elara had become a star, a young boy named Nilo came to the village. He was quiet, eyes full of questions, and never quite fit in with the children who laughed at things he couldn't understand. While they chased butterflies, he listened to birdsong. While they spoke of warriors and battles, he dreamed of books that whispered in the dark. He wandered the edge of the forest, drawn by a feeling he couldn't name. And then he found it. The twin trunks of the whispering willow stood taller now, their bark shimmering faintly in the moonlight. Nestled between the roots, a soft light glowed, not fire, not flame. He sat beneath the tree. The branches stirred, and the wind sighed his name. Nilo. Part 42. The Tree Remembers. When Nilo placed his hand on the roots, the glow responded. Visions bloomed behind his eyes, of a girl with ink-stained fingers, of a boy who danced with wind, of a girl made of echoes and starlight. Who are they? Nilo whispered. A low voice answered, neither male nor female, simply old. They are what came before you. The tree spoke again. We remember all who dared to listen. And then, slowly, stories began to unfold beneath Nilo's fingertips. Not just from the past, but possible futures. Fragments of ideas the world hadn't yet dreamt. You have the seed, said the tree. A seed for what? He asked. To become the next story bearer. Part 43. The Seed of Light. That night, Nilo dreamed of a seed made of stardust and ink. It pulsed in his chest like a second heartbeat. He awoke beneath the willow. A tiny sprout had grown near his feet, glowing faintly, unlike any plant he'd ever seen. It's not just a tree, he whispered. It's alive in story. The villagers began to notice strange things. Clouds moved in patterns that spelled words in forgotten tongues. Books left on shelves opened themselves to the right page. The wind, once silent, began to hum lullabies with no known composer. And always, at the center of it all, was Nilo. He didn't speak much. He listened, just like Elara once did. Part 44. The Return of the Dream Train. One night, under a moon that seemed to shimmer in rhythm with the tree, Nilo dreamt of a train made of starlight. It floated above the sky, trailing constellations behind it. He boarded it alone. Inside were passengers made of stories. Kale, Myron, Rowan, even the hermit of Hollowfall. Elara stood at the front, guiding the train through a sea of stars. She turned to him. It's your turn now, she said. He blinked. To do what? To find the stories that are afraid to be found. Then the train vanished, and Nilo awoke with a map in his hand, drawn in ink that moved. Part 45. The map that was alive. The map pulsed like a heartbeat. It showed no borders, no names, only moments. An island where dreams washed ashore. A tower that spun backwards in time. a shadow-shaped forest that grew stories instead of leaves, a mountain that erased memories with every step you took upward, and in the corner, a mark shaped like the willow tree. Nilo knew. Each place held a story Elara never reached. He packed a satchel. Inside, the glowing seed, the moon pebble, and a fresh notebook gifted by the villagers. Before leaving, he placed his hand on the willow one last time. "I'll return. I know," the tree whispered, "because all stories come home." Part 46. The Mountain of Unmaking. The first place the map led Nilo was to the mountain that erased. He climbed slowly, each step making him forget something. His name, his age, his favorite smell. But he clutched the seed of light in his palm. It pulsed warmth into his skin, reminding him that stories were stronger than forgetting. At the summit, he found nothing, only silence. But when he placed the seed into the soil, the mountain bloomed, and all the forgotten memories it had consumed over the centuries burst into flowers of light. He picked one and placed it in his book. A new story had been saved. Part 47. The Island of Forgotten Dreams. The next place floated between waking and sleep. An island only reachable when the tide of dreams rose. He drifted there one twilight, neither asleep nor awake. On the island, dreams roamed freely, creatures made of imagination and hope. But many were broken, misshapen. These were dreams abandoned before they could come true. They were shy until Nilo sat down and began to write. One by one, the broken dreams gathered around him, listening. He told them stories of Rowan, of Elara, of stars that needed remembering, and one by one they healed. The island thanked him with a pearl shaped like a closed eye. He placed it in his satchel. Part 48. The Voice of the Tree. Years passed. Nilo traveled across the map, through memories, forgotten cities, silent towers. Each time, he returned with a fragment of what the world had nearly lost. But one day, the tree's voice returned, soft and urgent. "Nilo, I am changing." He hurried home. The twin trunks of the willow had grown into one. Its roots now glowed beneath the earth. "I'm becoming more than memory," the tree said. "I'm becoming future." And then it asked, for the first time, "Will you plant another?" Nilo held the seed. He smiled. "Yes." Part 49. The Grove of Stories. Nilo traveled once more, but this time not to recover what was lost, to plant. He visited lands where nothing bloomed. He walked through cities of steel where no one listened anymore. In each, he planted a single glowing seed, and from each a tree grew. Not always a willow, sometimes an oak with silver bark, sometimes a flower that sang, sometimes just a patch of grass that whispered when the wind blew right, but always a place where stories could be heard. The grove of stories had begun, and the world began to remember itself again. Part 50. The Story That Never Ends. Years passed, then centuries. The willow tree still stood taller, older, wiser, now surrounded by children, travelers, and dreamers. Some came to listen, some came to speak, all came to remember. And in the starlit sky above the grove, one bright light always pulsed, Elara's star, guiding the dreamers onward. Some say, if you sit quietly beneath the tree, you can still hear her voice, or Rowan's wind, or Myron's laughter in the leaves. And some say, a new child will one day arrive. Sit down and begin again, because the Whispering Willow Tree never tells the same story twice. It waits for the listener, and the story continues. Part 51, The Last Listener. Many seasons passed. Nilo, now older, hair touched with silver, eyes still young with wonder, sat beneath the willow again, pen in hand, notebook open. He had written hundreds of stories, but now the pages were blank, not because he had no more to say, but because the story was no longer just his. Children gathered around him now. Some were born from the village. Others arrived from far away, led by dreams or stars or ancient whispers. He read to them, each word flowing like wind through leaves. And when he paused, one of the children, a girl with a crescent moon birthmark, asked softly, who wrote the first story? Nilo smiled. You did. And the tree glowed. Part 52, The Blooming Sky. That night, something strange occurred. The sky above the grove shimmered, not with stars, but with blossoms of light. They bloomed across the heavens, as if the stories written under the willow had lifted into the sky. People came from all corners of the world to see it. Some believed it was magic. Some called it prophecy. But the children knew. They pointed and whispered, that one's Rowan's storm. That flower is Elara's song. That one there, that's Nilo's seed. Each light was a memory, a moment, a tale. Each pulse of brightness, a heartbeat of someone who dared to dream and share. The sky had become a library. Alive. Part 53. The whisper becomes a voice. The whispering willow had always spoken softly. To Elara, to Myron, to Nilo. But now, for the first time, it sang. The villagers heard it as a lullaby. The travelers heard it as ancient poetry. The children heard their own names woven into verses. And Nilo, older now, tired, ready, heard something different. You have given us roots, the tree said gently. Now it is time for wings. He nodded. Then he took the final notebook from his satchel, the one he had saved for the last story. In it he wrote, "This is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of thousands." And he closed his eyes, not in death, but in rest. Part 54. The Grove of Tomorrow. Years passed again, but the story did not sleep. Where once there was one tree, now stood many. The grove had become a forest of storytellers. Each tree whispered something different. One hummed lullabies of the sea. Another told tales in riddles to the brave. One tree only bloomed when someone cried beneath it. And in its petals, It caught tears and turned them into laughter. Children who grew up beneath the branches returned as poets, weavers, musicians, dream keepers. They carried saplings on their backs and planted them in cities where silence ruled. The world, once gray, now bloomed in color because the trees had learned not only to whisper, but to listen. Part 55, The Book of All Things. One final tree stood at the heart of the grove. The original, the willow. Its bark now shimmered with stories carved by hundreds of hands, small and large, old and new. Every leaf whispered a different name. Every root held a memory. And beneath it, in a hollow carved gently by time, lay a book, bound in bark, inked in stardust. The cover read, The Book of All Things. No author listed, because all who had listened, spoken, dreamed were part of it. And if you ever find the tree and sit quietly, you might hear your own name spoken in the wind, because every soul carries a story. And the whispering willow tree, it still listens, forever